What's going on, workforce? Brian here.
Chris here.
And as we get ready to talk more about Final Fantasy XIV here in just a couple of days, as we barrel towards the 5th of February, which I think everybody's waiting for more information and just hungry for that. Because typically at this time of year, we already know the expansion name. We've seen the trailer. We're all speculating on it. But this is a whole different year, and thus we're left wondering. But what we do know that's on the horizon, what we do have information on, is a new upcoming MMORPG called New World. And so I want to kind of have the discussion talking about, should a 14 player, somebody who is really invested in Final Fantasy XIV, be paying attention to this other MMORPG that is assumedly going to be coming out this spring, unless they decide to change that date again. Chris, you've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV. You already know that I'm very interested in New World. I've played it. You're basically taking the stance. Tell me if it's ready, and I'll join you. So maybe that's the concept. Talk to me about, is that something? Is New World
play
something?
a game that's incomplete? We're at a point in the world where we have enough titles out there that I don't need to play the ones that are not putting their best foot forward.
Right.
I can wait. I got time, and if they never make it forward, that's fine. We got more games coming. So I just don't need to enjoy poor gameplay experiences. I think we're in a time in history where that's a luxury that we can take that stance.
Mm-hmm.
My general rule is that if you are primary in an MMO, the size of 14, is that I would not pick up another MMO in an expansion year unless you find you have the extra time.
Right.
Because if you're already feeling like I'm not getting everything I want to in 14, or I just started 14, the 14 has a ridiculous amount of content in it, and there just isn't a reason to pick up something, no matter how good it is, in an expansion year, which is 2019, 2021, 2023, 2025, until they shut it down. It just continues that pattern.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my general stance.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're assuming that New World, as a specific example, offers some reasons that it should be the exception to otherwise a relatively just decent general rule.
Right, and that actually comes down into kind of looking at trying to talk to like specific pockets of somebody who's into Final Fantasy XIV. So, for example, I definitely agree. If you were somebody who is just coming back or considering coming back for patch 5.5, which we assume will be sometime March, April, as dates become, a little bit more clear, there's going to be lots of content for you to play throughout the entire summer, and then obviously the expansion and the story. This time ends to be the most powerful time and exciting time within the world of Final Fantasy XIV, because we are barreling towards an expansion. And not only that, they'll have Ultimate, we'll have the finalization of the Near Raid. There will be some things that will bring everything together and hopefully keep things exciting. However, you're on stream today. We were live today, and a lot of people were talking about I've done everything. I'm at all 80. I've got all this stuff. What should I do? And I go, don't burn out. Don't listen to this aspect, and don't find yourself hating on the game because you pushed it too far. We talked about Endgame. We're going to talk about later coming next week. Talk about maybe some 6.0 mid-core changes that we would love to see in terms of content. But when I look at that, I say, imagine if, in the perfect scenario, New World does hit. New World isn't going to be that narrative-driven experience. So immediately, if you're just here in 14 for the narrative, New World's probably not going to be for you. However, if you're really big into the crafting scene, Chris just knocked out all of his classes on 80. New World is really heavily invested in that player economy and that end game appeal that the crafter brings into that aspect, right? So if that's something that interests you, all of a sudden there is a parallel connection within this world. And from a visual perspective, we're talking imagine jumping 10 years in the future, and all of a sudden you're like, they can do what with video games? New World presents itself a very visual, it might not necessarily be aesthetically or artistically pleasing, but it has a lot of features that I think essentially could hopefully come to excite the player base. And if essentially my kind of target, the player I think that would be most connected to this game for this time is the player who's I've done everything in Final Fantasy XIV. I'm ready for the expansion. And rather than burn out, I'm going to go dip my toe into something a little bit different that doesn't require, like a big emotional investment, a big narrative story, etc. That's kind of where I'm coming at it from.
I think as a new MMO, there's also going to be, they can only have so much content on day one. It's what makes it so hard to start a new MMO. So
Right.
Rather than at this point choosing to go pick up one of the established MMOs that's out there that may or may not have an expansion this year, I think that for New World specifically, there is the advantage that they've never made an MMO before.
Yeah,
This
Amazon.
is brand new.
Yeah.
So like the amount of content that's going to be there on day one is going to be very, very finite. And there will be parts of it that people have found a way to grind eternally, right? Make the most money, level the most characters. There will be ways to turn it into a time sink if you desire.
Yeah.
But if your plan is to just take a lap, get a feel for things, the phrases like I've run every dungeon in the game, I've leveled or I've tried crafting every item in the game.
Yeah.
Those are achievable goals in a brand new MMO compared to like somebody brand new to 14 today. They just started their level 1 character. Like, yeah, so I'll probably just try to, touch a little of everything. Okay, well, I'll see you in like 1,000 hours. Well, yeah, I just want to touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the story alone, if you're just trying to take that seriously, is 300 to 500 hours. So, knock yourself out. It's immense, this game. So I think there is an advantage there when you talk about like people that want to take a break specifically. Like I did 5.4, I did Ishkra, I was doing the restoration stuff. I was playing 20 hours a day for 2 weeks straight.
Yeah. Oh man.
My static doesn't do ultimate, so I'll watch it on Twitch, but it's not our thing. I'll do the near raid a couple of times and enjoy it and get some glamours. I'm sure that'll be awesome. I'll see where the relic goes from here. But I'm really looking down the barrel, and there's I don't know, 500 hours left, 40 hours left, whatever your number is between now and the expansion, which let's assume for a moment it's September, and you're like, oh, and I play 10 hours a week. If all of a sudden it might be a number where you are going to gap out. And if you try to add things to your plate that you don't really want to do, you do risk making the game feel obligatory. Like I have to do this. And then the problem with that is, say you decide, you know what, I'm going to try to get my tank mount. And so every day I'm going to log in and I'm going to do 60 trials, back to 6,000 trials, back to back to back. And then I'm going to do that every day between now and the expansion to get not just one tank mount, but all of my tank mounts. Then you get to the other end and you level up in the expansion. What's the first thing we're going to do at cap? We're going to grind gear. And when you go to grind gear, it's going to be like, well, what's the way to do that? Well, right now, like one of the more efficient ways is to do roulettes. And you're like, oh, please don't say that word. Like, don't say the word roulette. I don't, and so like putting yourself in a situation where some of the things that will be parts of the content loop of 6.0, making those things distasteful, you're kind of doing the expansion a disservice. And you're going to be like, I don't know why this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Like, well, because you played for 600 hours.
Right. So here's the good news in all of this, right? Because you brought up a lot of really good points, kind of that feeling of investment, that needing to play. That's one of the things that is a positive side of subscription and negative side of subscription. One of the things that's positive is it gets us all invested. Like, oh, I'm putting money into it. Like, you better believe I'm going to show up. Versus like somebody who's like, okay, the negative side is like, well, man, maybe I don't feel like playing, but I did pay for the month. I did buy 6 months. What am I doing with my time? And New World doesn't have a subscription. So it's like when I always kind of look at games in a holistic way, right? Like you could say that I used to play a lot of Destiny. I'm currently struggling to log into that game. And that seems natural with my world of Destiny. Sometimes I'm like, this is great. And I'm like, not so much. Anyway, so like rather than just kind of dump on games, I just go play something else. But Final Fantasy and Destiny were always kind of this perfect pairing for me, right? Destiny had things, and obviously different gameplay than I wanted, but it also had some similarities, right? They had that multiplayer aspect, had that community aspect, had PvE, it had PvP, and so when I look at New World, I look at it at two things. It's Amazon's. I can't say their last chance, but all their other games have just like gotten punched in the face. Like it's so hard that it knocked one out, and they took that team and they put them on like New World. They're like, guys, we're not salvaging Crucible. It's done. All right, so you got New World. B, as a controller player, if you guys haven't heard, New World supporting controller play right out the gate. it doesn't. I'm not advocating that people like leave 14 and here's New World. I'm saying that there's things that you enjoy about 14 from an MMO perspective that you might find a parallel, but at a cost, like not at a recurring cost. So you're not sitting here like, oh man, like I have to log in and I've got to go like grind this out. More or less saying like, oh man, I am tired. Like it's like this has been a long year.
It'll be a lot to learn too. It'll be all new.
All new, like, and it's also
the gameplay will be, every system will have different words that you've never used before. They'll mean something a little different than every other game.
Yeah.
You know, the stats, the way they're balanced, the importance of it, stat priority, the battle system, the pacing of it. It'll all be new. So at the very least, even if you get to the same point you are in 14 and you don't like it, at least along the way, it'll be new. It'll be fun to learn. And then when you get to the far end, you're like, and 14's is better. That's fine. That's totally fine. We don't know that yet.
Right.
And it'll be fun to be part of a community that's all new. I mean, we've been recently talking about, you know, content creators just putting out all the same crap. Well, everything for New World will be new. It's the first ever of each of these guides, the first ever of each of these discussions, the first ever responses. So with a new game, there is an excitement and a freshness to just all new stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's that, and also the engine itself. So a couple of cool things that has me excited. If you guys haven't seen the engine preview that Square Enix released from the Luminous engine, showing off just how, like, from even what we saw with 15 way back in the day, from its environments to just like it almost felt photorealistic. It, you know, like when it's got to be coupled with gameplay to really kind of connect, but it was gorgeous. And then you go into the Lumberyard engine, which it's just like I was walking around and constantly being impressed. I haven't experienced anything like that before. It was just so visually to the point where
the engine is one of the weaker parts of 14. Of everything 14 does well, the engine is it's one of our limiting factors.
And it's something that it's like you don't really notice until somebody shows you something like, wow, like that's a jump.
Until we ask for something and Yoshi P goes, I want it too.
Yeah.
The answer is no, because the engine won't run it.
Yeah, and so like I think that a 14 player will have an interesting on-road to it because of the native controller support for New World. So if you're a 14 player, that's kind of where I wonder if we'll see New World come into more platforms, because that's the strength of 14 over other MMOs. It's on PlayStation 4, it's on PlayStation 5. We hope that it's going to be on Xbox and who knows what other platforms, here in the near future, but. Kids, at the core of it, then I think that it's going to be interesting to see like how that adoption takes place, because when it comes down to it, like, is it something that gets people interested? Is there a natural on-road? Like you said, there will be different terminology, but is it something that kind of feels like a complementary to that of Final Fantasy XIV? Because it's not going, like, if they did it, like, I would be surprised, but it's not going to compete anywhere near the narrative. And I can speak for myself as somebody who loves JRPGs, who's thrilled for Brew Protocol. We'll be talking about that coming up on the channel as soon as they start releasing new news, by the way. That should be here in the next couple of months. But like the aesthetics, I first was kind of turned off by, because it has kind of this 16th, 17th century kind of aesthetic, this kind of frontierism. But then you get into it and you're like, this is something I never knew I liked. This is something that I'm really surprised by visually in this game. And so go ahead.
So to pivot just a little bit, everything we've said so far could be true of swap 14 out for any other major established MMO going into an expansion year, and swap New World out for any of the new MMOs coming out, preferably to make it truly parallel, from at least a studio that's inexperienced in the MMO space. So they're doing something they've never done before. PSO2 Genesis, Blue Protocol, a lot of the stuff where it's taking on challenges and it's taking on things where there's going to be growing pains, and it's going to be a lot of new. And so it's this topic so far, we could totally swap this out. But with 14 specifically, the things that jump out to me as big descriptors of 14 is people like or don't like that everything's on one character. They like or don't like that everything is narrative driven. They like or don't like that it's more shifted towards the casual side of the base than the hardcore. Right. There's only so much hardcore content added. They like or don't like that it has a much smaller focus on PvP than some of the other MMOs. and they like or don't like that it has a deep crafting system, in that like the number of hours, if you start at the beginning and you try to do it all yourself, make all your own stuff, gather your own, the hours there is a lot. So like, of those things, is there anything there that immediately jumps out to you as, prepare yourself, this is not going to be there? Or
No, that's the thing,
hey, I
yeah.
have great news, this is identical? Or like, how does that kind of core feature list compare?
It is so interesting that you kind of like, that's a really good thought, and I didn't connect the dots until you spoke that. But New World feels like what 1.0 tried to do. So you're all in one character, and the weapon that you
That
use
is both exciting and alarming.
Yeah, though. Yeah, exactly. Like, don't go. I'm not telling anybody to go out and pre-order. I'm just saying that
People have had this thought before.
Right. So
It
every
ended
one
poorly.
character, everything, like you pick up a weapon and you have those kind of skills. And what it does is it allows you to hot swap between weapons, as opposed to like job change, and you can't do it. So in combat, and now they actually just put a change out where you can only do it with 2 weapons rather than 3, so that essentially kind of basically almost in a way forces more class customization, more party customization, rather than being like, I can do everything, versus like, now you're taking 2 weapons. What are your 2 builds? And what's your build in that case with these 2 weapons? But just like within 14, like you level up your weapons. Like there's an overall level, like the physical level back in 1.0. And then there's also essentially your weapon level that unlocks skills, traits, and things like that, passives and those abilities. Very similar to 1.0, very similar to the mindset of 14. Same thing with crafting and gathering. All that levels up just like within it. Like, you want to go become a better cook? Go become a better cook. Like when I'm sitting here playing playing New World, I'm like, man, there are some serious parallels between these 2 games. And if you like, the biggest thing is the narrative, right? The biggest thing is like, yeah, you're not going to get that Final Fantasy story. And the biggest thing, the challenge it has, is that it's not building up from a game all this nostalgia. This is a fresh new game right out of the gate from an unknown develop. Like, I mean, not technically
There's
unknown.
nobody that's like, yeah, I played the last New World.
Right.
No, you didn't.
No, you didn't. and there, a part of that could be a plus in its, in its sense that like that we're going to discover this together. It's fresh. There's no like, that's what a Moogle
Anthem
is.
had that advantage, right? The newness carried a lot of its mistakes early on. The day one.
Yeah,
right. And the hype leading up to it. There was an excitement in being part of being
Something
the
new.
first people to set foot in this world. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, there's so much to
Now,
discover.
don't look anything past that moment with Anthem. Let's not draw any parallels there. But up to that point, it was very exciting to think. And we were all picturing, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have these flying suits. I'm gonna be invested. We weren't, but like we were going to be.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just think that there's definitely, like, if you're a 14 player, and depending on if you're planning on returning, New World's probably not going to be something that you're going to have time for. Maybe it's something that, like, if you got friends and that kind of connectivity tissue, that's going to be there. But if you're somebody, especially within 14, who's just looking for something, especially to lead, that kind of can help take off and help, like, hey, I'm going to go play this while I wait for, presumably 6.0. That it's going to be, I think,
or whatever.
Yeah, it could be something that's a really interesting thing to kind of keep an eye out on, if those are the kind of things that you like about 14. If you're looking for a narrative-driven experience, I'm sure there's going to be a handful of single-player games that could easily come and take in and fill up that gap, especially with all the delays out of last year into this spring and summer.
Genshin's been that thing. I think Genshin has an immense amount of voice acting and an immense amount of just casual, like just filling bars within bars within bars, and it feels good, and you feel like you can come and go at your own pace. And so I think for a lot of people, Genshin was that I'm taking a break from 14 game of 2020.
It was, I think Genshin was, I'm taking a break from all these other games and playing this.
Of all, yeah. And once again, swap anything, insert anything into anything.
And there you go. All right, well, Chris, you got any final thoughts? I'm just excited about New World. I'm happy that we got to sit down and actually kind of talk about it, and especially in the context of Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah. I think at the end there, you kind of you told me a couple things that make it unique, where it's not like, okay, but like I could also feel new going into Guild Wars, ESO, SWOTR, Blue Protocol, PSO2. Like there's a lot coming online that I could feel new about, right? And Shadowlands is so far for me a good expansion. So like there's a lot I could go dive into. Why New World specifically was the post that you said, hey, I want to sit down and talk about this. And I think there's a couple things that are interesting. I still feel the exact same way. Like I'm gonna watch Brian run through that door and see like, do
I get hit in the face? Like boom.
Like he just gets nailed, and like I'm not even gonna get up out of my chair. I'm just gonna be like, well, That looked like it hurt.
Yeah, I'll let Brian take the hits, or I end up running through the door. I'm like, let's go. Anyway, I'm excited for New World. Hopefully they crush it and deliver an excellent game, and hopefully we'll find out more about 14. And hopefully this year it could be a lot of fun for games and more. Let us know if you're interested in New World whatsoever in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But for Work to Game, my name is Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thanks so much for watching. We hope you have a fantastic day.
We'll see you next time.